All right, welcome back. Today we're going to talk a bit about the sign of Capricorn. Let's not waste any time and get right into it. All right, as per usual, as we talk about the zodiac signs, when I'm talking about the sign of Capricorn, I'm not talking about you specifically. If you identify as a Capricorn, I'm merely talking about the energy of the sign. When someone says they were born a particular sign, such as Capricorn, what they are saying is that the sun was in the sign of Capricorn at the time of their birth. That is their sun sign. But all of the other signs and all of the other planets are within your chart somewhere. You may have more than one planet in Capricorn, which then you'll really identify with this sign. Or it may not be your sun sign and you have no planets in Capricorn, but it's your rising sign, and you still may identify with it. But in any case, I'm merely talking about the sign itself. All right? Now, my sun sign is Capricorn, so I do identify with this quite a bit, but not 100% completely because I have a lot of planets in other signs, which I identify with as well. All right? So for the new people to astrology, that's why the horoscopes are so hit and miss, because they only take the sun sign into account instead of the entire chart. All right, so the first thing we need to know about Capricorn is its ruler and its element. Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, and its element is cardinal Earth. Saturn is known as the greater malefic planet, and you're going to see why, because Saturn can be a bit dark, scary, and quite uncomfortable to deal with. A lot of people think that it's evil, but it's a necessary evil. It's not really evil, but it gets that reputation because it's not pleasant to deal with. And we'll talk a bit more about Saturn later on. Capricorn begins with the winter solstice. And anyone familiar with Game of Thrones, winter has come. The Night King has arrived. In Game of Thrones, they depict winter as being evil, personified by the Night King. The cold and darkness is the realm of Capricorn. The winter solstice is when the light of day is at a minimum, and we have the longest night. And in Game of Thrones, they talk about the long night. So Capricorn begins on the shortest day of the year. That is in the northern hemisphere. Capricorn, being cardinal Earth, is all about structure. And by structure, I mean physical structure. The element of Earth relates to physicality. Capricorn is a sign of the architect, because cardinal Earth initiates structure. Saturn, its ruler, is the planet of boundaries, limitations, space and time. And without these things, you couldn't exist. If you don't have boundaries, you don't have shapes, you can't have structure. With space, there has to be room for the structure to be in. Where does one thing end and another begin? All of this is necessary to exist. But again, Saturn gets a bad reputation because with limitations comes difficulties, even though they may be completely necessary. So Capricorn is a sign of structure, but it also is a sign of societal structure, society in general. Now, in the opposite sign of Cancer, we had the home, and in Capricorn, you're out of the home in society, or rather your home's home, the larger home, and your place within it, because it has to do with societal structure, hierarchy. As such, Capricorn is an excellent social climber. So it would also make sense that Capricorn is a sign of authority. But before I get too ahead of myself, I want to back up a bit and talk a little bit more about structure, because it's very important with Capricorn. The parts of the body that Capricorn rules is the skeleton, the teeth, and the knees. Now, what's interesting about the skeleton is that it's the only part that remains after you die. And Saturn, the ruling planet of Capricorn, also rules over time. Time is Capricorn's greatest power, so to speak, because time is also Capricorn's greatest lesson. Capricorn is very much a late bloomer. Capricorn looks old when it's young and looks young when it's old. Capricorn is almost always successful. However, it can take a very long time for that success to come about. And the way it comes about, the lesson that has to be learned, is by tapping into the positive aspects of Saturn, by using patience and persistence, the things that cannot be mastered without respecting time. When you're impatient, you want things now. You're not respecting time. And if you get the things from just wanting it, not having to work for it, You won't learn anything from it, and you won't appreciate it as much. Think of Will Smith in the movie The Pursuit of Happiness. He had to work himself to the bone, pun intended, and go through such difficulty and adversity to get the success that he really desired, with failures along the way, because Capricorn rules over failure as well. The failures you learn from. That is a stepping stone to success. And in the end, he persevered and was finally successful, and it was all worth it. The Pursuit of Happiness movie is very Capricorn. So Capricorn is all about putting in the time. And it's interesting that our skeleton is the only thing that remains of us after we're gone, which also makes it a symbol of fear. People are afraid of the dark wintry night with skeletons. Capricorn rules over fear, but fear is, again, necessary. It's necessary for survival. Fear is what keeps you from doing stupid things that can get you killed. It reminds me of that movie, The Walk, with Joseph Gordon-Levitt, where he walked the tightrope between the Empire State Building and another building. Now, most people would look at that and say, oh, hell no. There's no way I would do that. I would die. That is a reasonable fear that is necessary for survival. Well, that same survival fear is within feral wild animals in regards to humanity. Wild animals are afraid of people, and for good reason. They will typically flee from you, unless they become so scared that they just freeze up, as a deer in the headlights would do. They get placed under the spell of Capricorn, and a lot of animals end up roadkill. So some fear will keep you alive. Too much fear can get you killed. Fear is necessary for survival. It's meant to preserve you. Capricorn's job is to preserve things, and it mainly does this by freezing them. This is why when there's too much fear, an animal will simply freeze. Now, that doesn't do much good in front of a speeding car. You may think, well, the animal's just being stupid. But when something is traveling much faster than they can ever outrun, to them the best course of action is to freeze and stand still and hope that it doesn't chase and come after them. Maybe it will pass them by, right? And that's the tactic that they use in the wild with other animal predators. If you can't outrun it, freeze and hope it doesn't find you. By stealth. Unfortunately, they haven't yet learned that the middle of the road is not the best place to do that. But fear is designed to preserve. Capricorn's job is to preserve. People think of Capricorn as being aloof and somewhat cold emotionally, but that's Capricorn's job. Its duty is to freeze things. So they have to be cold. They have to freeze the food to preserve it. Winter has to freeze things to preserve them. Yes, many things will die off. Many plants, for example, but they'll also return in the spring. So Capricorn does get a bad reputation for being cold and going around freezing things, but it does so that it can save them, it can preserve them, or conserve them. Capricorn is very conservative. Conservative meaning wanting to keep things the way that they are, to prevent them from rotting, such as in the case of food, or something that's working, such as the status quo, or even their authority. The phrase, no news is good news, is Capricorn. And this is why Capricorn is associated with authority and establishment. Because you have to understand, Capricorn is cardinal Earth. Structure. And the thing about structure is that you want it to be reliable and stand the test of time. Whether that structure be a bridge that you're driving across, the roof over your head, or the very structure of our society. Cardinal Earth does not like instability. Structure is order, not chaos. Capricorn would not approve of all the rioting that went on in 2020. Whereas a sign like Aries, who's always ready to go to war, would want to be right in the middle of the action, with dark side Libras fanning the flames. But Capricorn doesn't want any part of that. Structure needs stability. And Capricorn brings that stability. You can even hold water when it's frozen into blocks of ice. Now, Capricorn is the most serious of all the zodiac signs, and for good reason. There's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of things to freeze and many structures to be made, and no time to play around. Capricorn has to be serious, because the actions and steps that you've taken going into the winter can be a matter of life or death. If you don't have enough food to survive the winter, you will die. Now, we may have mostly eliminated this danger in the first world in modern times, but in the third world, and in the not-so-distant past even in this country, it was a serious concern. Capricorn has to be serious because if you go into winter and you don't have your food and you don't have your structure to protect you from the elements, then you're going to freeze or starve to death, etc. It's the most serious sign because it has the most serious repercussions for not following its directive. But interestingly enough, it's also the sign that's most connected to humor. Some of the best comedians are Capricorn sun signs. So even though it's the most serious sign, it does provide some comic relief. Even though a lot of those comedians are miserable, Capricorn is also the sign of suffering. Take Andy Kaufman, Man on the Moon. He was absolutely miserable. He was also dying of cancer, which only added to his suffering. And sometimes the only way to deal with pain and suffering and fear is to laugh at it, to make light of things. Robin Williams, another absolutely brilliant comedian, completely miserable. But you couldn't tell it when he was performing. The man was always funny. But comedy and jokes, they have this component in them where somebody's suffering. It's making light of something or somebody. They say that when babies first learn to laugh, when you're playing peekaboo and things like that with them, what you're actually doing is scaring the hell out of that baby. Because you pop up, peekaboo, and they don't recognize you for a second, and then they recognize your face, and then they laugh. But when the grandma they've never seen before comes and does it, well, then they start crying and screaming their head off because they don't know this person. So interestingly enough, there is some fear in humor, in our ability to laugh at things. And Capricorn excels at it because it is a dark, sarcastic energy. Capricorn is the most responsible sign, always fulfilling its obligations, the most reliable. Again, because we have to have structures be reliable. And it's the most serious too because it has to work very hard for everything that it gets in life. Now Sagittarius may just luck into things. Capricorn actually has to work for them. But in doing so, Capricorn becomes self-sufficient and doesn't rely upon anyone. Capricorn rules over career. And this is another duality aspect with its opposite sign of Cancer, where Cancer rules over the home, Capricorn rules over career. And many people are forced to choose between home life and their career. Many times one has to be sacrificed over the other. And it's typical for a Capricorn to do just that in favor of their career. Because Capricorn also rules over ambition. Capricorn is the mountain climber. It is the goat that climbs the mountain and wants to get to the top. Now, it may be lonely at the top, but that doesn't dissuade Capricorn. But because Capricorn also rules over fear, it is very cautious. Because the higher that the goat climbs, the farther it can fall. So it has to use caution to be sure-footed. Because the further you fall, the more you can stand to lose. It reminds me of our former governor here in Missouri, Eric Greitens. Because a lot of politicians are Capricorns. There's that authority, there's that ambition, there's that drive to get to the top of the mountain of societal structure. So there is that association with politicians. Eric Greitens was a Republican conservative governor who wasn't in office very long. But for the short time he was there, he did actually a pretty decent job with the apolitical things. I recall we had a really bad snowstorm approaching, and his response was absolutely impeccable. He made sure that the salt trucks went out and the snow plows were going. But because he was on the right, the opposition went and uncovered a scandal, found someone to make an accusation against him, and ended up forcing him to resign. And it was quite the fall indeed. Now, it's come out recently that it was all made up, and that the person who made the claim has even gone back on making the claim, from what I understand. But now nobody cares because it's too late. But because he was forced to resign, it always reminds me of Capricorn and the caution that it has to take. Because if there are any mistakes along the way, in that ascent, in that climb, they can be uncovered and cause a fall. That's pretty much what a political attack is trying to cause another goat that they're in opposition to fall. And the thing is, there's not really much at the top. There's just a little bit that only a goat can eat at the top of the mountain. because a goat will eat anything to sustain it. Capricorn's motto is, I use. Capricorn will use anything at their disposal to get the job done. Now, the dark side of Capricorn goes a bit further to where the ends justify the means. And unfortunately, you're seeing a lot of that right now in today's society with all the censorship going on and clamping down on individual freedoms. But hey, they're only doing it to save you from wrongthink. It's for your own good. See, the ends justify the means. Sure, it's anti-freedom right now, but in the end, it'll all be worth it, we promise. See, the dark side of Capricorn is when its authority becomes authoritarian. Anyone that uses their power to bully, limit, or force someone to do something that they don't want to do, or otherwise wouldn't do, is authoritarian. I know Capricorn. I know authoritarian when I see it. The whole for your safety thing has always been its favorite excuse. So that's the dark side of Capricorn. The ends justify the means. The Sagittarius will tell you there's nothing at the end. It's the journey that matters. But Capricorn is too transfixed upon the goal at the end. It doesn't care how it got there, which can end up being a huge problem. Taking shortcuts is also the dark side of Capricorn, especially when it comes to career. Capricorn's tarot card is the devil. There's a depiction of the devil sitting on its throne with Adam and Eve chained to it. And this is where people get frozen. This is where people get stuck along their path with promises of success, the temptations of taking shortcuts. This is where the whole sell your soul to the devil for success and fame comes into play, which is almost always for the advancement of a career, right? To become famous for their career, for their music, etc. But it's just really symbolism for Capricorn. The devil has horns like a goat. It can have cloven hoofs like a goat. Baphomet is half goat. Well, the shortcut is from the devil because you're not respecting time. Haste is from the devil, as they say. Think of a weightlifting bodybuilder. Well, maybe able to get to the goal faster if I take this shortcut with steroids. That's the devil. That's the dark side of Capricorn. The ends justify the means. Instead of doing it the right way with hard work, patience, and time. It's where you get the whole devil versus holy water opposition. You know, like you sprinkle the holy water on the demon in an exorcism. Well, Capricorn is the devil, and Cancer is the holy water. It's cardinal water. The opposite signs, they're in opposite polarities. Cancer is the water. Capricorn is the cup, the structure that holds the water. There's all kinds of symbolism that's wrapped up into this. Capricorn rules over skepticism. Well, because they're cautious. They're not just going to trust you. They don't know you yet. Now, when Capricorn gets overly skeptical, it could be a problem. But Capricorn's default mode is skepticism. It is an earth sign. It believes in this physical world in the here and now. Now, a Capricorn that does have faith doesn't have to climb the mountain. It can move mountains. They can make the best healers and magicians because of Capricorn's practicality. And that is the sign of Capricorn, the goat, the greatest of all time. That's another thing. The goat's pupils aren't really round. They're more square or rectangle. Well, four corners are symbolic of Earth. And they also have the long goatee beard. And it always looks like they're smiling because they're known for their humor. The last thing I want to go over is Saturn, Capricorn's ruler. It moves around the zodiac in increments of 7. So about every 7 years from birth, regardless of your sign, you are going to have a Saturn event, either a square, opposition, or a return. Now, the Saturn return is going to happen around the age of 28, 29. This is your Capricorn initiation. This is when you're probably going to have a lot of frustration, a lot of difficulties. And the way you get through these difficulties is with the positive aspects of Saturn that we talked about earlier. Persistence, patience, discipline, and learning from your failures. And it's by learning from these difficulties that you're going to find out who you are. During your Saturn return, Saturn will show you who you are by showing you who you're not. And during this time, you have to become serious. You have to grow up to become a man or a woman. There's no more time to play around. I had just recently released that Tom McDonald Occult in Plain Sight video. And afterward, I had come across the clip where he had talked about the reason that he don't rap about what other rappers will rap about. guns, drugs, money, women, drinking, etc., where he almost died from having a breakdown 4 years prior. Well, he's 32 now. That would put him at 28, prime Saturn return age. And it was during this time of extreme difficulty that he realized what was important to him and what was not. And all of the things that the other rappers would rap about, he realized he didn't care about. And so he started making his songs only about the things that he cared about.
Dude, I started off just like everybody else, making the same lame music that everybody else was making. I was talking about the girls and the drugs and the clothes and the cars and the partying and blah, 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 blah. Because that was all I knew. I was listening to my favorite rappers. I was emulating what my favorite rappers were talking about. That's what my favorite rappers were talking about, so that's what I did. And I was a kid, and I didn't know myself. I didn't have my own story yet. It's taken a pretty drastic change in direction in these last 3 years, and that can pretty much all be attributed to the fact that I was an alcoholic and I almost died from a mental breakdown 3.5 or 4 years ago now. I'll have to tell you guys the story about that night sometime. Like, I think that a lot of people slowly go crazy and slowly have a mental break over a period of time. But mine happened like this. Boom. One night, everything changed. And following that one night, I spent 9 months living at my mother's house, reading about what I was going through, researching how I could get better, going to the doctor, going to therapy, taking the medication, quit drinking, quit smoking weed. Things were ugly. I've said it before. I said 2 words to my mom every single day for 9 months. She'd wake up in the morning and I'd be sitting on the couch and she'd say, "How are you doing today, Thomas?" And I'd say, "Not good." And that was it. I couldn't eat. I was gagging to eat 1 banana or 1 egg, choking it down, literally gagging, almost throwing up 1 egg every day. I couldn't sleep. I'd lay in bed with movie playing on my computer and an iPod with a podcast playing next to my head because I could not deal with silence. I could not handle the silence at all. I didn't talk to my friends for 9 months. I didn't take a phone call. I didn't write a song. I didn't post on the internet. I didn't do anything. So for that 9 months, think about that. For 9 months, I was in constant mental anguish and constantly internally in turmoil for 9 months, every second of every day for 9 months. So literally every minute felt like a goddamn eternity. Like, it felt like the days would never end. And I was just in pain. And it was like that for 9 months. So in that period of time, I looked within myself and I got to know who I was. And I got to know a lot of things about me. A lot of people think that they have grit. And a lot of people think that they're mentally tough. And a lot of people think a lot of things about themselves. You really find out how fucking tough you are when you have a fucking mental breakdown. There's a million people in the world that you could fight and beat up, or you could fight and lose to. There is nothing on the planet like fighting against yourself every day for 9 months. I guarantee it. So in that process, I learned about what was really important to me and who was really important to me and why are those people important to me and what's not important to me. Clothes, the music I've been making about drugs and guns and cars and girls and brand names and money and blah, blah, blah. That stuff is all unimportant. When you're literally a moment from death on a consistent basis for an extended period of time, you find out real fucking quick There is no amount of money. There is no brand name piece of clothing. There is no vehicle. There is nothing in the world that can save you from that type of misery. And you learn real f***ing quick what's important to you. And maybe most importantly, you learn about what's not f***ing important to you. And I learned that all that shit is not f***ing important to me. So now, the music that I'm making now is directly happening because I learned what's not important to me. So now I make music that means something to me. It's about that I think about, that I feel. And I know a lot of people like to scream facts and stuff all the time. I'm not always right. This is just my personal opinion about stuff. It's my personal feelings. Sometimes it's not even my personal opinion. I'm just talking shit because I know it's going to piss people off. And I like affecting people's emotions on a real level. That's what's important to me. So the things I talk about now are things I really give a shit about. I don't talk about the cars and clothes and drugs and hoes and guns and blah, 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 because I don't care about that stuff. And I learned that I don't care about that stuff when I spent 9 months almost dying.
So that's what a Saturn return is like. And not everyone's strong enough to survive it. There are a lot of people who do die or take their own life during their Saturn return. Those who cannot take the pressures of it. And then around the age of 56 to 60, you're going to have another Saturn return. And during this one, you'll see a lot of older men, especially, have a scandal exposed or have some fall. And again, the higher the climb, the greater the fall. Saturn isn't bad, it's just not comfortable. It's going to put you through the things that you need to go through in order to get you up and get you moving. To stop wasting time, stop wasting your life, and get on your path. It's a swift kick in the butt that everybody needs. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like and share it if you did. It helps others find it so they can enjoy it as well. Consider supporting me on Patreon or Subscribestar, where you can get early access to videos just like this. Follow me on social media, links will be down below in the description. And lastly, visit the Teespring store, where I have many shirts and mask designs available. This is Frater Xavier from Mind and Magic, and I will see you next time, my little goat babies.
Baby goat,